This is the extraordinary story of the USS England, one small escort ship that, within a span of just 12 relentless days, would sink 6 enemy submarines. It was a feat so astonishing, so statistically improbable, that no navy in history has ever managed to duplicate it. Between May 19 and May 31, 1944, this single American vessel didn't just get lucky, it systematically hunted down and destroyed an entire Japanese submarine picket line, rewriting the expectations of naval warfare and proving the lethal potential of new anti-submarine technology. But the story of the USS England is not merely one of advanced equipment or flawless tactics. It is a powerful intersection of human courage, brilliant intelligence breakthroughs, and innovation born from desperation. And surprisingly, it doesn't begin with roaring engines or depth charges echoing across the Pacific. Instead, it starts in the quiet, fluorescent-lit rooms of U.S. Navy codebreakers in Pearl Harbor, ordinary-looking buildings masking one of America's most decisive wartime advantages. On May 13, 1944, the Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, FUPAC, the direct successor to Commander Joseph Rochefort's legendary Station Hypo, intercepted what seemed like just another routine Japanese transmission. The submarine I-16 radioed a simple report to the commander of Submarine Division 7, an estimated arrival time near Bougainville at 2,200 hours on May 22. On the surface, it looked harmless, but to the seasoned intelligence officers at Pearl Harbor, this message was far more than an update. It was a rare and invaluable window into Japan's undersea movements, a chance to strike directly at the backbone of their submarine force. This intelligence success was built on years of painful, methodical work. Since the opening months of the war, American cryptanalysts, mathematicians, linguists, puzzle solvers, had labored inside windowless rooms stacked with IBM tabulating machines and endless piles of coded paper. Their breakthroughs had already shaped history, contributing to victory at Midway and across the Solomon Islands. But never before had decrypted information been used so quickly and so precisely in an anti-submarine operation. Breaking the Japanese naval code JN-25 required not just mathematical skill but an intuitive sense for patterns, language, and cultural nuance. Each intercepted message had to be logged, analyzed, and decoded through a mix of mechanical computation and human insight. Once decrypted, the intelligence was rushed through secure channels to the U.S. Third Fleet, and from there to Commander Hamilton Haynes, leader of Escort Division 39 stationed at Tulagi in the Solomon Islands. Haynes was a seasoned destroyer officer, a veteran of Atlantic convoy battles whose experience hunting German U-boats would soon prove critical. He wasted no time. Drawing on the best anti-submarine assets in the region, he formed a 3-ship hunter-killer group. All 3 were Buckler-class destroyer escorts, USS George under Lieutenant Commander Fred W. Just, USS Raby under Lieutenant Commander James Scott, and USS England under Lieutenant Commander Walton B. Pendleton. England was pulled off duty from Escort Division 40 at Purvis Bay to join the mission immediately. On May 18, 1944, the 3 ships departed Purvis Bay with Commander Haynes aboard the USS George, taking charge of the operation. The selection of these vessels was deliberate. Each had been extensively trained for anti-submarine warfare, their crews drilled for months in sonar operations, coordinated attack patterns, and emergency procedures. They had worked together before, forging the communication rhythm and teamwork that would soon become essential. Though many sailors on board were young and new to combat, there was no lack of preparation, and this preparation would soon yield results beyond anyone's expectations. Meanwhile, on that very same day, newly intercepted Japanese communications revealed a more troubling picture. The Imperial Navy was assembling a 7-submarine scouting line known as the NA Line, stretching between the Admiralty Islands north of New Guinea and Truk in the Caroline Islands. This line had been placed directly across the approach route American carrier forces were expected to use for their next major offensive. Japan's high command knew an Allied invasion was coming, but they didn't know where. Would the target be the Marianas, the Western Carolines, or perhaps the western tip of New Guinea? With their carrier fleet shattered and their island strongholds increasingly isolated, Japanese leadership relied heavily on submarines as their last viable means of gathering intelligence and slowing the American advance. The NA Line was intended as an early warning net, one that would detect the approaching U.S. fleet and give Japan a precious few days to react. What the Japanese did not know was that their early warning line had already been compromised, before it had even begun its mission. And heading toward it at full speed was the USS England and her crew, unaware that they were about to etch their names permanently into naval history. Each Japanese submarine was assigned a rigid patrol area, ordered to stay put and report any sightings of American naval activity. Unlike the flexible operating zones used by American submarines, this inflexibility would prove to be a fatal flaw. Japanese strategists, analyzing recent carrier strikes supporting General Douglas MacArthur's westward push along New Guinea's northern coast, concluded that Western New Guinea was the most likely target for the next Allied landing. In response, Admiral Somu Toyota, Commander-in-Chief of the Japanese Combined Fleet, issued orders for Operation AGO, an ambitious plan intended to deliver a decisive naval strike that could halt the American advance and secure Japan's inner defensive perimeter, including the Marianas, Western Caroline Islands, and Western New Guinea. The execution of Operation AGO would ultimately lead to catastrophic defeats for Japan, culminating in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the infamous Marianas Turkey Shoot, where Japan would lose 3 aircraft carriers and hundreds of irreplaceable pilots and planes in June 1944. By this stage of the war, Japan's naval weaknesses were glaringly obvious. The loss of experienced carrier pilots at Midway, the Eastern Solomons, and Santa Cruz had never been fully recovered. Replacement pilots, rushed through abbreviated training programs, lacked the skill and instinct of their predecessors. Meanwhile, the United States had built an industrial-scale pilot training program, producing thousands of highly trained aviators. Technologically, the gap was widening as well. American fighters like the F-6F Hellcat outperformed Japanese aircraft in speed, armor, and firepower, and U.S. ships bristled with radar-directed anti-aircraft guns, making attacks increasingly suicidal. To support Operation AGO, Vice Admiral Tokogi Teo, commander of Japan's 6th Fleet submarines, ordered the 7th Submarine Squadron to establish the NA scouting line. Tokogi, a veteran of numerous Pacific campaigns, had witnessed the steady decline of his submarine force. At the start of the war, Japanese submarines were elite, with well-trained crews and deadly torpedoes. But losses had been severe, and replacement crews lacked experience. Moreover, Japanese submarine doctrine, emphasizing attacks on warships rather than merchant shipping, had proven strategically flawed. While American submarines were strangling Japanese supply lines, Japanese submarines were being hunted relentlessly with minimal effect on American operations. In a decision that would prove disastrous, the 7 submarines were assigned fixed positions along the NA line instead of flexible patrol areas. This rigidity turned a defensive measure into a fatal vulnerability. The chain of events leading to their destruction began with an intercepted American aircraft contact report on submarine RO-104. In response, Japanese headquarters transmitted orders to the NA line, directing all submarines to shift 60 nautical miles southeast, providing precise coordinates for each vessel. To the untrained eye, this seemed like routine operational communication. But American radio intelligence immediately picked it up, forwarding it to the Joint Intelligence Center, Pacific Ocean area. Cryptanalysts pored over the messages, breaking not only the Japanese code but decoding the coordinate system and operational conventions. The result was a breakthrough: the exact positions of each NA line submarine. For the first time in the Pacific War, this ultra-secret intelligence was sanitized and shared directly with frontline anti-submarine units, giving them a previously unimaginable edge. And it proved uncannily accurate. Japanese submarines were consistently found within 50 nautical miles of the predicted locations, often much closer. Sharing such sensitive intelligence was not without risk. If Japan discovered their codes had been compromised, the advantage would vanish overnight. Elaborate cover stories were prepared, attributing the sightings to routine patrols or aerial reconnaissance. The crews of the hunter-killer group were told they were acting on reported sightings, never knowing their success rested on one of the war's most closely guarded secrets. The 3 destroyer escorts chosen for this mission were relatively new Buckler-class vessels, part of a massive wartime production program that would eventually yield 154 specialized anti-submarine ships, with some 148 completed, including units serving under Lend-Lease with the British Royal Navy. The Buckleys were designed as a balance of capability and mass production, smaller and cheaper than fleet destroyers, they could be built rapidly in commercial shipyards, even by workers with limited experience. But don't mistake size for weakness. With their sonar, depth charges, and well-trained crews, these ships were deadly hunters, and about to prove it in a way no one could have predicted. Though smaller than fleet destroyers, these ships were anything but powerless. Packed with enough firepower and cutting-edge anti-submarine equipment, they were lethal hunters of the deep. Their diesel-electric propulsion systems limited top speed slightly, but gave them exceptional range and the ability to operate for long stretches without refueling, perfect for relentless submarine patrols. Every ship carried a name steeped in heroism, honoring fallen servicemen and carrying their legacy into every battle. This naming tradition was more than ceremonial. It inspired the crews to rise above fear, to act with courage that went beyond ordinary duty. USS George honored Seaman Second Class Eugene F. George, posthumously awarded the Navy Cross for extraordinary bravery during the brutal naval battle of Guadalcanal on November 12, 1942. During that nightmarish battle, fought at point-blank range under the cover of darkness, George and his gun crew faced a flaming Japanese G-4M Betty bomber deliberately aiming for the cruiser's gun positions. Despite the imminent explosion, they never faltered, continuing to fire until impact. The bomber struck the bridge, killing Admiral Daniel Callahan and his staff, but George's valor and that of his fellow gunners were recognized with the Navy Cross, their names now immortalized aboard USS George. USS Raby bore the name of Rear Admiral James Joseph Raby, a World War I hero who commanded the first American-escorted transatlantic convoy. Raby had pioneered anti-submarine tactics still in use decades later. Though he died in 1934 in a car accident, his legacy lived on in the vessel that carried his name, a constant reminder that protecting vital shipping lanes could save countless lives. USS England carried perhaps the most poignant story of all. Named for Ensign John Charles England, a young officer killed during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, his heroism was legendary. Only 4 days shy of his 21st birthday, England had volunteered to work in USS Oklahoma's radio room that fateful morning, swapping shifts with a friend who wanted to see his family. England himself was awaiting the arrival of his wife and 3-week-old daughter, whom he had never met. When torpedoes struck Oklahoma and the ship began to capsize, Ensign England initially made it to the deck, only to see chaos beyond imagination. Oil-covered sailors struggled in the water, some on fire, strafed by Japanese aircraft. Remembering the men still trapped below, England descended into the capsizing ship not once, not twice, but 3 times, each time guiding a trapped sailor to safety through flooding, darkened compartments. On his 4th attempt, he disappeared forever into the ship's flooded hull, one of 429 who perished that day. His remains would not be identified until 2016, when DNA technology finally allowed him to return home to Colorado Springs. Though he received only a Purple Heart, his sacrifice lived on in 2 warships bearing his name, D-635 and the later guided missile cruiser CG-22. The Buckley-class destroyer escorts themselves were engineered for a singular purpose: hunting submarines. Their 3 3-inch guns provided minimal surface action capability, but their main strength lay beneath the surface. They carried a triple bank of 21-inch torpedo tubes, 2 stern-mounted depth charge racks, 8 K-gun depth charge projectors capable of firing charges to either side, and most crucially, the Mark 10 Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar, a weapon designed to obliterate enemy subs before they could strike. With this combination of skill, courage, and specialized firepower, the crews of George, Raby, and England were armed to execute one of the most remarkable anti-submarine operations in naval history, setting the stage for the extraordinary 12-day hunt that would make USS England legendary. It was this last weapon, the Hedgehog, that would prove decisive in the battles to come. The development of specialized anti-submarine vessels like the Buckley-class destroyer escorts reflected hard-earned lessons from the Battle of the Atlantic, where German U-boats had come perilously close to cutting off Britain's lifelines. The Allies quickly realized that defeating submarines required more than firepower alone. It demanded purpose-built platforms, designed from the keel up to hunt and destroy enemy subs. These ships needed long range to escort convoys across vast oceans, stability to operate in rough seas, and sophisticated detection systems capable of finding submarines hidden beneath the waves. The Buckley class met all these requirements, and with American industrial might behind them, they could be mass-produced in record numbers, ready to take the fight to the enemy. The Hedgehog represented a true revolution in anti-submarine warfare. Born from desperate necessity during Britain's darkest hours in 1941, it had been developed by the British Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapons Development and first deployed in 1942. By late 1943, it was widely available to American forces, just in time to change the course of naval engagements in the Pacific. The weapon itself was both ingenious and terrifying. It consisted of 24 projectiles arranged in 6 rows of 4, mounted on a trainable platform that could fire them in an elliptical pattern 200 to 300 yards ahead of the attacking ship. Each projectile weighed 65 pounds and carried a 35-pound charge of TNT or Torpex. Fired in a precise, simultaneous sequence, all 24 would strike the water at once, creating a deadly 140 by 120-foot killing zone. The name Hedgehog came from the launcher's appearance. The spigot mortars resembled the spines of the small mammal, but there was nothing cute about the devastation it could unleash. What made the Hedgehog truly revolutionary was its contact-fused warheads. Unlike traditional depth charges, which exploded at preset depths whether or not a submarine was nearby, Hedgehog projectiles detonated only upon hitting a solid target. This simple innovation changed everything. For the first time, commanders could immediately know whether an attack had succeeded. Explosions meant a hit. Silence meant a miss. There was no more agonizing wait of 20 minutes or more, scanning the surface for oil slicks or debris to gauge the result. Reloading was also dramatically faster. In roughly 3 minutes, the ship could fire another salvo, keeping relentless pressure on enemy submarines that might otherwise slip away during long reloads required by traditional depth charges. Perhaps most importantly, the Hedgehog solved a problem that had plagued anti-submarine warfare for decades: sonar blindness. Depth charges detonated whether they hit or missed, creating massive underwater concussions that deafened sonar for minutes, while turbulent water and bubbles reflected sonar pulses, allowing submarines to escape. The Hedgehog avoided all this. If the projectiles missed, the water remained calm, and sonar operators could maintain continuous contact, immediately setting up a follow-up attack. The psychological impact was just as profound. Depth charges were terrifying. An explosion in the water, even if it missed, could shake a submarine crew's nerves, forcing them to surface or surrender. The Hedgehog, by contrast, was a silent killer. Submarines had no warning until the projectiles were already in the water, taking just 7 seconds to reach 200 feet. Experienced submarine commanders who could calculate depth charge patterns and maneuver to avoid them found themselves helpless against this new weapon. The numbers speak for themselves. British analysis showed that during World War II, traditional depth charge attacks required an average of 60 salvos to sink a single submarine, and early in the war, that number could exceed 100. The Hedgehog reduced that ratio to just 5 or 6 attacks per kill, a tenfold increase in lethality. Though each projectile carried less explosive power than a conventional depth charge, a single direct hit was usually enough to breach a submarine's pressure hull and send it to the bottom, often with terrifying suddenness. In the coming battles, the Hedgehog would turn these relatively small destroyer escorts into unstoppable hunters, redefining naval warfare and proving that innovation, courage, and precision could topple even the most hidden and deadly adversaries. The contact explosion against I-16's hull would prove devastating, far more destructive than the shockwave from a near-miss depth charge. The submarine's own steel hull contained and focused the explosive force inward, leaving little chance of survival for anyone aboard. But I-16 was no ordinary vessel. A veteran of 9 war patrols, she carried a combat record that was as daring as it was tragic. A Type C-1 submarine, she stretched 358 feet long and displaced 3,561 tons submerged. On her deck, she could carry a small Type A midget submarine, an innovation that would mark her place in history. I-16's most infamous mission began at Pearl Harbor, where she participated in the very first submarine-based attack of the Pacific War. In the pre-dawn hours of December 7, 1941, 5 mother submarines, including I-16, launched their midget subs in a desperate attempt to penetrate American harbor defenses. Under Lieutenant Junior Grade Yokoyama Masaharu, I-16's midget submarine set out at 0042 hours before the aerial assault, aiming to strike American warships from inside the harbor. The mission was audacious, but ultimately futile. None of the 5 midget submarines returned. One was sunk by the destroyer USS Ward in the first shots of the war. Another was destroyed inside the harbor by USS Monaghan. One ran aground, producing the first Japanese prisoner of war in America, while 2 simply vanished without a trace. Yokoyama's fate remained a mystery, though radio messages from the midget subs hinted at both success and failure in the chaotic hours of December 7th and 8th. The gap between Japanese ambition and reality had never been clearer. I-16 would eventually taste success, but only after 6 months and thousands of miles across the Indian Ocean. On May 30th, 1942, operating near Diego Suarez in Madagascar, I-16 launched another midget submarine under Ensign John C. This craft successfully infiltrated the British anchorage and struck the battleship HMS Ramillies, a 29,150-ton veteran of World War I. The torpedoes caused massive flooding. 1,800 tons of water rushed into the ship, and for a time, Ramillies was nearly lost. The attack demonstrated I-16's potential for deadly surprise strikes, though such missions were almost always one-way trips. During the Guadalcanal campaign, I-16 shifted roles, running multiple supply missions to isolated Japanese garrisons and launching additional submarine attacks. She became part of the infamous Tokyo Express, ferrying supplies under constant threat from American aircraft and warships. On November 28, 1942, she launched H-10, which torpedoed the American cargo ship USS Oklahoma, carrying aviation fuel and ammunition. The vessel burned for days but was eventually salvaged, a testament to both the destructive power of I-16 and the resilience of her targets. By early 1943, I-16 was performing perilous supply runs to bypass garrisons in New Guinea. Even after surviving an air attack in December 1943 that caused only light damage, the submarine's luck was running out. Once a pride of the Imperial Navy, I-16 and her sisters were reduced to carrying rice and medical supplies to starving garrisons, missions fraught with danger and little strategic gain. Each voyage was a gauntlet of American patrols, a test of nerve against an increasingly dominant navy. The Japanese Code of Honor demanded no garrison be abandoned, yet the cost was enormous, veteran crews risking everything for meager tons of rice. On May 14, 1944, I-16 departed Truk Lagoon under Lieutenant Commander Takeuchi Yoshitoka, carrying 75 rubber bags of rice for the starving Japanese garrison at Bin on Bougainville. 40,000 men had been cut off since November 1943. Starvation and disease had reduced their strength, and there were even reports of cannibalism. The mission was desperate and doomed. American intelligence had intercepted and decoded I-16's departure transmission. The 3 destroyer escorts of the hunter-killer group were already moving into position, closing in on their target with deadly precision. I-16, the once proud veteran of daring attacks, would soon meet the end that had eluded her for so many years. A collision course with history that would mark the start of a 12-day submarine hunt unlike any other. On the afternoon of May 19, 1944, an Allied reconnaissance aircraft, a consolidated PBY Catalina from a Navy patrol squadron, spotted I-16 surfacing north of Bougainville. The sighting confirmed the intelligence that had drawn the hunter-killer group into these waters. I-16 was on the surface to recharge her batteries and gain speed, a dangerous necessity, as Japanese submarines of this period had weak batteries and could move slowly underwater, leaving them highly vulnerable to radar-equipped ships and patrolling aircraft. The 3 destroyer escorts immediately formed a line abreast, creating a coordinated sonar sweep across the area. Spaced at optimal intervals, the ships formed an acoustic net from which escape was nearly impossible. At 1,335 hours, England's sonar operator, a young sailor from Iowa seeing the ocean for the first time, reported contact. The distinctive ping revealed a solid object at 1,350 yards. The hunt had begun. Lieutenant Commander Takeuchi, commanding I-16, fought for his life and the lives of his 106 crew members. He deployed every evasive tactic in the Japanese manual: sudden depth changes, sharp turns, speed fluctuations, and releasing air bubbles to create false sonar returns. Japanese submarine crews were trained to think in 3 dimensions, using both course and depth to confound attackers. Lieutenant Commander Pendleton maneuvered England into her first attack run. Coordination had to be perfect. Sonar operators tracking the sub, the plotting team calculating course and speed, and the Hedgehog crew preparing the weapons. But the first salvo missed. I-16 dove and twisted away, narrowly avoiding disaster. The second attack also failed. Time and again, the submarine outmaneuvered its pursuers, its massive hull straining under the violent maneuvers. On the third attack, England scored a single hit. The explosion reverberated through the submarine's interior, tossing men against bulkheads, shattering light bulbs, and flooding compartments. Yet I-16's crew held control, pushing their vessel to the limit. Pendleton prepared for a fourth attack, which again missed. The tense chase dragged on for over an hour. Every sailor aboard England felt the pressure. A submarine was trapped beneath the waves, yet they couldn't deliver the fatal blow. By the fifth run, England's crew had learned I-16's patterns: a tendency to turn port when diving, preferred depth bands, subtle clues in the sub's evasive maneuvers. At 1,435 hours, multiple Hedgehog projectiles struck. The underwater explosion was cataclysmic. England's stern lifted out of the water, sailors thrown to the deck, the ship rattling from bow to stern. The blast was felt across the other destroyer escorts miles away. 20 minutes later, debris began surfacing: oil, rice bags, wooden planks, cork insulation, even a sailor's cap and pages from a Japanese book, haunting reminders of the human cost of war. The submarine that had launched the first attack on Pearl Harbor was gone, taking all 107 crew members, including Lieutenant Commander Takeuchi, with it. They had died in the service of a mission that, in the end, could not change the outcome. The rice they carried meant for a starving garrison that would surrender months later. Meanwhile, the 7 submarines of the NA line had departed Saipan on May 17, 1944, moving into their assigned positions. The departure was marked by ceremony. Vice Admiral Takagi himself attended, urging the commanders to serve the Emperor faithfully. Each captain received a ceremonial cup of sake and a white headband inscribed with patriotic slogans. Yet deep down, every officer knew the odds were stacked against them. By 1944, American anti-submarine capabilities had evolved to deadly efficiency, and the coming days would test every skill, weapon, and ounce of courage in the Pacific. All 7 submarines of the NA line were RO-class boats, type RO-100, far smaller than the monstrous I-16. At just 760 tons, these coastal defense vessels were armed with 4 bow torpedo tubes carrying a total of 8 torpedoes, along with a 76mm deck gun. Their design reflected pre-war Japanese naval doctrine: quality over quantity. They were well built and sturdy, but too few in number, lacking the mass production advantage that made American submarines so deadly. Most were equipped with Type 22 radar detectors, yet had no radar of their own, leaving them blind in the open ocean and forcing them to spend dangerous hours on the surface using visual lookouts. Of all 20 RO-100 submarines Japan would produce during the war, not a single one would survive to see surrender. The first to meet her fate was RO-106. This submarine was no greenhorn. She carried a notable war record. On July 18, 1943, during operations in the Solomon Islands, RO-106 had torpedoed the American tank landing ship LSD-342 in Blanche Channel near New Georgia. The detonation of her torpedo ignited the LSD's ammunition stores in a catastrophic explosion that split the ship in two. The stern sank immediately, while the bow remained afloat long enough to be towed to shore. Among the 121 men killed were the ship's mess division of African-American stewards and cooks, as well as the renowned artist Lieutenant Commander Mellon Barkley, creator of many iconic wartime recruiting posters, who had volunteered for combat duty. RO-106 had survived serious damage from airdrop depth charges in October 1943, only to return to service after repairs. In the pre-dawn darkness of May 22, 1944, Georgia's radar operator spotted a surface contact, RO-106, running on the surface to recharge her batteries under the cover of night. It was a necessary but perilous maneuver. A 24-inch searchlight from George suddenly illuminated the submarine, catching her completely by surprise. The radar detector had failed, leaving RO-106 blind to the approaching destroyer Escort. The blinding beam would have pierced the eyes of anyone on the bridge, obliterating their night vision. Despite the sudden exposure, RO-106 crew reacted swiftly, ordering an emergency dive. Within seconds, the bridge cleared, and the submarine was plunging beneath the waves. The dive, executed in under 40 seconds, was textbook Japanese Navy procedure, but it wasn't fast enough. At 0415, George launched her first Hedgehog salvo, but the evasive RO-106 slipped through. At 0425, England gained sonar contact. The submarine zigzagged violently at 8 knots, twisting and turning to evade detection while changing depth. England's first Hedgehog salvo missed, but RO-106 made a fatal miscalculation. Attempting to counterattack, she reversed course and turned toward England, unwittingly placing herself directly in the Hedgehog's lethal forward kill zone. The second attack struck with deadly precision. At least 3 projectiles hit the hull. The explosions would have devastated the interior. Bulkheads buckled, water flooded compartments under tremendous pressure, and electrical systems shorted out in showers of sparks. RO-106 broke apart and sank immediately, taking all 49 crew members with her. From initial radar contact to destruction, the action had lasted just 36 minutes. The next day, another RO-class submarine would meet its end. RO-104, under Lieutenant Hisoshi Izubuchi, had spent previous patrols in the frigid North Pacific and Aleutian Islands, a stark contrast to the tropical waters she now hunted. Despite the change in theater, RO-104 carried a distinguished record. On November 3, 1943, during the Battle of Empress Augusta Bay, she had executed a daring rescue operation, saving 75 survivors of the Japanese light cruiser Sai, sunk in a night surface battle with American cruisers. The mission was perilous, with American aircraft patrolling overhead and enemy warships nearby. Among those rescued was Rear Admiral Baron Matsuji Iduin, commander of Japanese destroyer Squadron 3, whose survival was considered vital to the Imperial Navy. On May 23, 1944, at 0604 hours, an Allied PBY Catalina spotted RO-104 on the surface roughly 250 nautical miles north-northwest of Kavieng, New Ireland. This time, the submarine's radar detector actually worked, giving her crew just enough warning to execute an emergency dive. The lookout spotted the approaching aircraft almost simultaneously, and RO-104 slipped beneath the waves before the destroyer escorts could close to gun range. Once submerged, the submarine's captain put every evasive tactic into play. Rabi made the first attack run, but RO-104 had learned from the fate of her sisters. Beyond violent turns and depth changes, she deployed acoustic countermeasures, bursts of tuned sound impulses designed to confuse the sonar tracking the ship. For 2 long hours, Rabi's Hedgehog attacks missed again and again. George then took over the hunt, her crew determined to succeed where Rabi had failed. The destroyer Escort launched 5 Hedgehog salvos, each one carefully aimed, but RO-104 twisted and turned with deadly precision beneath the waves. The captain fought for his crew's lives with skill and resolve, but time and air were running out. Batteries drained with every evasive maneuver, and carbon dioxide levels rose in the cramped submarine compartments, making every breath heavier. Finally, at 0819, England moved in. Her crew, having observed RO-104's evasion patterns for hours, noticed subtle tendencies. A preference for starboard turns while diving, favored depths between 200 and 250 feet, and predictable acceleration before major course changes. With this insight, England's second attack hit with deadly accuracy. Between 10 and 12 Hedgehog projectiles struck, detonating against the hull with a roar beneath the waves. The sounds of tearing metal, imploding compartments, and the final silence told the grim story. By 10:45, debris surfaced, wooden decking, cork insulation, oil slicks, even a life ring with Japanese characters, proof that RO-104 and all 58 hands had been lost. The deadly efficiency of the hunter-killer group was becoming clear. In just 4 days, they had destroyed 3 Japanese submarines, but the hunt pressed on. On May 24th, RO-116 became the next target. Only 6 months old and on her second war patrol under Lieutenant Commander Shibuya Kuno, the boat carried a young, inexperienced crew. Many were recent graduates of the Japanese submarine school, men who had joined the Navy full of dreams of glory, now facing the harsh reality of a war slipping from their grasp. At 0120 hours, George gained radar contact at an extraordinary 17,000 yards, nearly 10 miles away, about 225 nautical miles north-northwest of Kavieng. USS dove immediately, but the crash dive was slower than standard, a sign of the crew's inexperience. At 0150, sonar contact was established at 750 yards. USS-116's crew executed the same desperate tactics as their predecessors: violent rudder shifts, sudden depth changes, and sophisticated sonar jamming. For a time, it worked, frustrating George's attack runs. England then joined, launching 2 aborted Hedgehog attacks as targeting solutions faltered. But on the third attempt at 0214, England's crew cracked the submarine's patterns. At least 3 projectiles struck home. The kill was quick and eerily silent. No massive secondary explosions, likely because USS-116's torpedoes did not detonate. The submarine simply broke apart, sinking swiftly and taking all 56 hands with her. 2 days later, on May 26, USS-108 under Lieutenant Ori Konichi came under attack. USS-108 had already proven herself deadly. On October 3, 1943, she had fired 4 torpedoes at 3 American destroyers in Huon Gulf off New Guinea. USS Smith evaded, but USS Henley was hit twice amidships, rupturing fuel tanks, flooding compartments, and breaking the ship's keel. Henley broke in 2 and sank rapidly, killing 15 men and wounding 52 more. USS-108 escaped that day, diving deep and running silent, but now she would face the relentless hunter-killer group at full force. Later, on December 17, 1943, USS-108 had been caught on the surface by a PBY Catalina while recharging her batteries. The aircraft's depth charge attack caused serious damage, and the submarine began taking on water through compromised hull plates, stern first. Yet, through heroic damage control, her crew worked in flooded compartments to shore up bulkheads and patch leaks, ultimately saving the boat. USS-108 would return to service after months of repairs at Truk, battle-tested but vulnerable. At 2,303 hours on May 26, Rabi gained radar contact on USS-108 at 15,000 yards, about 110 nautical miles northeast of Cedar Harbor at Manus Island. England also gained radar contact before the submarine submerged. Once below the waves, sonar picked up USS-108 at 1,650 yards. The submarine raced at maximum submerged speed, attempting to outdistance the destroyer escorts before an attack could be mounted. Rabi's first Hedgehog salvo missed, as USS-108 executed a precise turn inside the attack run, a maneuver demanding nerves of steel and exact timing. At 23:23, England made her attack. There would be no prolonged hunt this time. The first salvo found between 4 and 6 direct hits. The explosions tore USS-108 apart almost instantly. Her hull, already weakened from previous battle damage, could not survive multiple strikes. USS-108 sank with all 53 hands. By now, Japanese naval intelligence was in a state of alarm. On May 27, intercepts revealed several submarines had been destroyed north of the Admiralty Islands. American communications, described by Japanese intelligence as increasingly jubilant in tone, had confirmed the devastating losses. Warnings were immediately sent to the remaining NA-line submarines on multiple frequencies, repeated several times to ensure reception. USS-112 received the warning and immediately cleared the area, surviving only to be sunk months later by USS Batfish off Luzon on February 11, 1945, with all 61 hands lost. USS-109 also received the warning and escaped the killing zone, though her survival was temporary. She would be sunk on May 7, 1945, off Okinawa with no survivors. USS-105, under Lieutenant Junichi Aino, either never received the warning or chose to remain at her assigned position. Perhaps her radio was damaged, or perhaps duty-bound by the presence of Captain Ryonos Kato, commander of Submarine Division 51, aboard, she stayed in place. Previous patrols had shown USS-105 was no stranger to danger. On August 12, 1943, she narrowly avoided 2 torpedoes from USS Tarpon with violent evasive action. In September, she fired at the light cruiser USS Columbia but missed, and she had performed multiple rescues of downed Japanese aviators under enemy fire, operations requiring her to surface near hostile territory. After sinking USS-108, The destroyer escorts urgently replenished their depleted stocks of Hedgehog projectiles at Cedar Harbor, Manus Island. Every hour in port was a race against time, as enemy submarines could be repositioning or preparing attacks. Once rearmed, they joined a larger hunter-killer task group centered on the escort carrier USS Hoggett Bay, including destroyers Hazelwood, Herman, Hull, McCord, and the destroyer escort Spangler. The addition of air power from Hoggett Bay's aircraft expanded their search capabilities, allowing them to detect and vector surface ships toward hidden submarines across vast ocean distances. During the night of May 30th to 31st, Hazelwood gained radar contact on RO-105. The submarine immediately submerged and began one of the longest and most intense submarine hunts of the war. RO-105's captain unleashed every trick, discharging debris to create false sonar targets, releasing oil slicks to simulate damage, and executing violent maneuvers that strained the hull to its limits. The hunt stretched through the night, with multiple ships taking turns attacking. Hazelwood dropped depth charges, sending towering geysers of water into the air, yet the submarine remained elusive. George launched multiple Hedgehog salvos, potentially scoring 3 hits with 1 salvo, but RO-105, with her strong watertight compartments, survived, continuing her desperate fight to evade destruction. As dawn broke on May 31st, 1944, Spangler and England joined the relentless hunt. The morning sun reflected off a calm sea, revealing a long trail of oil marking where RO-105 had already been hit, but the submarine was far from finished. Spangler fired a Hedgehog salvo, but the submarine's last-ditch evasive turn sent the projectiles harmlessly aside. At that moment, Commander Haynes, still aboard George, transmitted a message that would become legendary among naval circles. "Oh, hell, go ahead, England." It was equal parts acknowledgement of England's superior track record and exasperation at the stubborn Japanese submarine refusing to die. England's crew, who had spent the night watching sister ships attack without success, were ready. They had meticulously observed RO-105's patterns, noting subtle cues, a slight hesitation before major turns, a preference for certain depth bands under pressure. At 0736, England unleashed her Hedgehog salvo. Between 6 and 10 projectiles struck home, triggering a massive underwater explosion that dwarfed even the destruction of I-16. Secondary detonations followed as RO-105's own torpedoes exploded inside her hull. The violence of the blast was extraordinary. Columns of water shot hundreds of feet into the air, and the shockwave reverberated through the hulls of ships miles away. RO-105 was obliterated, Captain Cato and all 55 crew members killed instantly. The oil slick spread for miles, mingled with debris, fragments of the hull, wooden decking, and personal effects, grim reminders of the human cost of modern naval warfare. In just 12 days, from May 19 to May 31, 1944, USS England had sunk 6 Japanese submarines, an achievement unmatched in the history of anti-submarine warfare. Remarkably, England was a modest destroyer escort on her first war patrol, only 5 months out of the shipyard. Of the 7 submarines assigned to the NA line, 6 were destroyed, 5 of them by England's Hedgehog. Only RO-109 survived, and she would meet her fate less than a year later off Okinawa. The impact of England's success went far beyond immediate tactical gains. Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Ernest J. King sent a message that carried the weight of a promise: "There'll always be an England in the United States Navy." It was a tribute to both the ship's unprecedented achievement and to Ensign John C. England, whose heroic sacrifice at Pearl Harbor had inspired her crew. The crew of USS England received the Presidential Unit Citation, one of only 3 destroyer escort crews so honored in World War II. Lieutenant Commander Pendleton earned the Navy Cross for his leadership, though historians note that Lieutenant John A. Williamson, England's executive officer, deserved equal credit for training the crew, refining attack procedures, and maintaining operational precision, work later recognized when he assumed command of the ship. Strategically, the loss of the NA line submarines sowed confusion in the Japanese Navy. Believing a large American force was moving toward the Western Carolines or New Guinea instead of the Mariana Islands, Admiral Toyoda misdirected fleet units, wasting fuel and precious time. By the time the Japanese realized their error, the American invasion of Saipan on June 15, 1944, was underway. This led directly to the Battle of the Philippine Sea on June 19 to 20th, a catastrophic defeat for Japanese naval aviation. Over 400 Japanese planes were shot down in what American pilots called the Marianas Turkey Shoot. 3 carriers were sunk, and the myth of Japanese air superiority was shattered. The fall of the Marianas also brought American B-29 bombers within striking distance of Japan's home islands, sealing the nation's fate. While the US Navy attempted to keep England's extraordinary success secret to protect the intelligence that made it possible, Japanese naval intelligence correctly deduced that radio intercepts had led to the submarine losses. Yet, in denial, they continued to believe their main naval codes were secure, a mistake that would cost them dearly for the remainder of the war. The story of USS England transcends a single campaign. It is a testament to ingenuity, courage, and unwavering determination in the face of mortal danger. It shows how, even in the darkest hours of war, ordinary people can rise to extraordinary challenges, leaving a mark that endures through history. The crew of USS England did exactly that in May 1944, etching their names permanently into the annals of naval warfare.